What is going on, everyone? This is Ninja Geek here. Welcome back to another video, and today we're going to be talking about the top 3 most underrated Call of Duty games in a response to Dying Food's video, so I'll leave that in a link in the description below and then a card on the top of your screen so you can see his most top 3 underrated Call of Duty games. And I'm going to list my own opinion of my top 3 most underrated Call of Duty games, and I guess a spoiler here in the beginning of this video, I only agree with pretty much one of his underrated Call of Duty games. Now, he did talk about Infinite Warfare in the beginning of his underrated list, and basically I'm going to do the same thing with an honorable mention to start it off. And that honorable mention is at the number 4 spot, I guess you would say, is Call of Duty World at War. And the reason why I have this game on here is because, at least in the honorable mention spot, for some people who have been playing Call of Duty for much longer than myself, probably would put this game higher up on this list. But I have it here at number 4, the honorable mention spot, because I didn't play Call of Duty, I didn't start playing until Black Ops 1, but when I went back and played World at War, and from everything that I've heard from people who have played it back in its prime, we all know that Call of Duty 4 was the more popular game than World at War. And I'm not trying to say here that World at War wasn't as good as Call of Duty 4 or even as better than Call of Duty 4, but it didn't really get the love that it should have gotten simply because Call of Duty 4 was out and people didn't want to go back to another World War II game at that time, since Call of Duty 4 was more modern and it was, pretty much new and it lasted for years to come. And so World at War kind of just got overshadowed by the previous game, and not a lot of people ended up staying long on the game, even though I think, in my opinion, even from going back and playing it, of course now it's all hacked, but back in the day when I was back on the 360 years ago, World at War was still pretty fun to play. And Zombies, of course, was the first time we've ever seen Zombies, and it was amazing in that game, and ever since then, they've grown upon the Zombies franchise and always included it in every Treyarch game. World at War is really where everything started it all off, and that's why I would put it here as an honorable mention, because it was very underrated, but it was a great game, and I feel like a lot of people would put this on their underrated list. But coming in at number 3 is Call of Duty Ghosts. Call of Duty Ghosts is my number 3 spot for the most underrated Call of Duty game, because back in its prime, Call of Duty Ghosts I think it was considered to be a good game, but then over time it just kind of got boring. And the reason for that is because they had these large maps. Of course, with everything that was in the game and how the game was built, it really just seemed to promote camping. And a lot of people, of course, don't like getting shot in a bush every single match. And they had the M27 thermal scope with the silencer, of course, that you can use to sit in a bush. And, they did a lot of things, though, in Call of Duty Ghosts that would have made it a great game. Following that up from the Modern Warfare series, the game before Ghosts that they made, Infinity Ward made, was Modern Warfare 3. And so Ghosts, I feel, took a lot of the things from the Modern Warfare series. They just kind of changed it a little bit for Call of Duty Ghosts. But overall, it was the last new Call of Duty that had boots on the ground. And with Black Ops 4, you could say that game is boots on the ground, because then, World War II, of course, is boots on the ground as well. But of the newer games, of modern games, not taking into effect that World War II, of course, is boots on the ground, of a modern era Call of Duty game, Ghosts was the last one I'll consider to be, because Black Ops 4, I don't believe, is a boots on the ground game. When you can jump higher than the moon and run faster than the speed of light, I don't consider that to be boots on the ground. I mean, it plays more like Halo than a Call of Duty game. But Call of Duty Ghosts, I would consider to be one of the last boots on the ground games of the modern era that we've gotten. And it definitely had its problems. And I'm not going to sit here and say that Call of Duty Ghosts was an amazing game, But Call of Duty Ghosts had a ton of potential to be an amazing game, and really all they had to do was, of course, the DLC maps they made for Call of Duty Ghosts, unfortunately, were the best maps in the game, and usually that's not the case. Usually the default maps are the best, and the DLC maps are just kind of like, they're whatever, they're playable, they're, new maps. But the maps in Call of Duty Ghosts for the DLC, they were really, really good. And unfortunately, they released them in DLC. If those were the default maps and the streaks were much better than what they were, or they had more of a variety, Call of Duty Ghosts could have been an amazing Call of Duty game. But because of those few things, and of course here and there some minor things that happen, like the guard dog being so hard to kill and all that stuff, it could have definitely been a better Call of Duty game, but still, for the game that it is today, it's very underrated, because a lot of the times, people will have those memories of Call of Duty Ghosts having these giant maps and all that stuff, and they're like, oh, Call of Duty Ghosts is the worst Call of Duty game. And even back in the day, I used to think the same thing. By the end of Call of Duty Ghosts' life cycle, I really did not enjoy Call of Duty Ghosts, and I said that it was the worst Call of Duty game. And then we got Advanced Warfare, and then, the list goes on, and, you just get these newer games that are just worse than the previous games, it seems like, all the time. But Call of Duty Ghosts, looking back on it now, it was kind of underrated, but it was underrated for a reason. It was underrated because Infinity Ward didn't really do anything to make the game better for free, in other words. So it was definitely an underrated game, and it could have been a lot better, but that's why it's here at number 3 on this list, because it's not the most underrated, but at the same time, it still kind of is in a way. Moving on to number 2, the number 2 spot, I put here as Infinite Warfare, and the reason is because, of course, Infinite Warfare is a jetpack Call of Duty game, and there are many things that I don't agree about it, and I don't really like the jetpack Call of Duty games and the jumping around and the boost sliding and all that stuff. But overall, as a game, as a core game, Infinite Warfare was a great game, and the reason, of course, we all know why it got a lot of hate, because it was a jetpack game, it was a futuristic game, and the reveal trailer got, well, it's one of the most disliked videos now on YouTube. YouTube Rewind actually, I think, overtook it. I think it is the most disliked video on YouTube, put out by YouTube themselves. So I don't know what spot Infinite Warfare is at now, but it got a lot of hate during the reveal and during the launch, and a lot of people didn't even give it a try, really myself included, until later on. And Infinite Warfare isn't really that bad of a game. If you go back and play it now, it really isn't that bad. They had a lot of cool things in that game. They had a lot of fun things in that game. And that's the thing that I think is the most important thing to take away here, is Infinity Ward is one of the most fun studios of all of the studios, that including Treyarch and Sledgehammer. Infinity Ward, I think, is the most fun. And they do a lot of unique things with their games. In Infinite Warfare, they did a lot of things very well with the multiplayer, but it was very underrated, and now going back on it, it's like, I kind of wish that I put a little bit more time into it. Of course, I do wish that it was more boots on the ground, but still, it was underrated for the game and how much they put into the game that it was. And another reason why I feel like Infinite Warfare is underrated is just because of Activision's kind of stupid decision to make the number 1 most underrated Call of Duty game on this list be bundled with Infinite Warfare. And yes, that's right, I do agree with you, Dying Food. Modern Warfare Remastered is the most underrated Call of Duty game. Back when Modern Warfare Remastered was announced, of course we were all happy, but then it suddenly turned bad when we found out that Modern Warfare Remastered was only available if you bought the Infinite Warfare bundle. So you had to buy Infinite Warfare to get Modern Warfare Remastered, and this turned a lot of people off, not myself included, because I really wanted to play Modern Warfare Remastered. I really had no intention of playing Infinite Warfare after the beta or the demo, I should say, of Call of Duty Infinite Warfare. But Modern Warfare Remastered was such a popular game, of course, that's why Infinite Warfare sold, because a lot of people wanted to buy it, and unfortunately, it's just underrated. I mean, the numbers even show it. There was a graph recently that said on PS4 only how many players logged into those specific Call of Duty games. I believe that's just the game. I don't think that's launching the multiplayer or anything, but how many people played those games? And Modern Warfare Remastered was pretty low on the list. Now, Black Ops 4 was lower than it, but that's just because it's a new game, and there's probably a lot of people that are going to be picking it up, for Christmas that have already, logged in and stuff, so it probably is going to get more popular. But Modern Warfare Remastered was one of the lowest on that list, and I guess for good reason, because Activision really fucked up. They screwed up when they released Modern Warfare Remastered, and they knew it because then they released it like 6 or 7 months later as a standalone game, and not a lot of people bought it because the game at that point was already dead. And, at this point, I still sometimes occasionally go back and play Modern Warfare Remastered. It's a great game, but they ruined it just because they bundled it with another game that was already releasing that year and at the same time as well. They really ruined it for themselves here with Modern Warfare Remastered, and there's no one to blame but Activision, and that is the reason why Modern Warfare Remastered is the most underrated Call of Duty game. Because, yes, it does have its problems. It's just pretty much like Call of Duty 4 with better graphics, but as Dying Food did say also in there, they could have done so much more with it. They could have added in much more maps from more Modern Warfare games. And, maybe in the future they do have planned. I mean, it was a big thing back in the beginning of 2018 that Modern Warfare 2 Remastered was going to come out. And maybe they do have plans to release more Modern Warfare Remastered games, hopefully separately, so that they don't make it on this underrated list here. But, unfortunately, that never happened. And it would have been nice to see some of those Modern Warfare 2 and Modern Warfare 3 maps bundled in with Modern Warfare Remastered as the time went on, giving the game life, giving it content, as well as weapons, and so on and so forth. It would have been a great experience, but unfortunately the support for the game died off fairly early, I would say. Within the 6-month time period that the game was out, it just kind of died altogether. It really was buried in the grave, and we really hadn't heard anything about Modern Warfare Remastered. And so therefore the game has pretty much died, and it's still pretty much dead. I mean, you could go back and play it and you still find matches, but there's no talk about the game. It just kind of got submerged under the water, as if Activision just kind of wanted to cover up their horrible mistake, and hopefully that never happens again. But yeah, that's pretty much why Modern Warfare Remastered is the most underrated Call of Duty game, and yes, I do agree with that. But as far as the other choices go on your list, I definitely don't agree with Call of Duty Advanced Warfare. The thing that I really don't agree with is because Advanced Warfare, during its reveal stage, a lot of people were excited because it was something new. Then when I personally played it, I kind of felt more detached from the game, and I even went back several times to play Advanced Warfare. And it's just not a fun Call of Duty game. And yeah, they innovated a lot of different things, and they had the customizable kill streaks, which I personally wasn't really a fan of. I know it gives you more stuff to do, but I just felt like it was corny to do that. I'd rather have more kill streaks than customizable kill streaks and even or less amount of them. So I don't know. I just feel like Advanced Warfare wasn't underrated. It was actually just mediocre, like in the middle, moderate. It wasn't overrated. It wasn't underrated. It was just the game that it was, and a lot of people, like myself included, didn't really find fun in Advanced Warfare. So with that one, I disagree. And but with Modern Warfare Remastered, I definitely agree with that one. And so I'll see you next time for the top 3 most overrated Call of Duty games. And Dying Food, I already know what your number 1 spot is going to be, but I'm just going to wait to hear it myself. So I'll see you on the next one. This is Ninja Geek. I'm out, and peace.